Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. It was the month of Ramadan, in the second year after Hijrah. Just over 3 months had passed since Ghazwatul Ushayra had taken place, when the caravan of the Quraysh managed to slip away to Sham. The Muslims received word that the caravan was making its return journey to Makkah from Sham. This caravan was being led by a person who at the time was not yet a Muslim, but in the future would not only become a great Sahabi who would go on to lose both of his eyes in different jihads, but he would also become the father-in-law of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This Sahabi was Hazrat Abu Sufyan, Sakhr ibn Harb radiyallahu anhu. So upon receiving the news of the caravan, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam set out with 313 of the Sahaba radiyallahu anhum to attack the caravan. Hazrat Uthman ibn Affan radiyallahu anhu was left behind by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam on this occasion, but included in the reward and the spoils as though he had physically taken part in the battle, because his wife, the daughter of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Hazrat Ruqayyah radiyallahu ta'ala anha, was terminally ill, and she in fact passed away before Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam returned from the battle. Despite having to deal with this, it did not hinder Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam from setting out in jihad fi sabilillah. The Muslims marched out to a place which has kept its name throughout the ages, Badr. And this is where the battle got its name from, Ghazwatu Badr al-Kubra, the great battle of Badr. The usual route used by the Mushrikeen would mean that they would have to pass this way, past Badr. So the Muslims set up camp and waited for the arrival of the caravan. However, the spies of the Mushrikeen worked out the plan of the Muslims. So the news was rushed off to Hazrat Abu Sufyan radiyallahu anhu, and he immediately sent word to the Mushrikeen of Makkah of what the Muslims had planned. When the Mushrikeen heard this, they wasted no time and gathered an army of 1,000 soldiers of Quraysh, and they set out to protect the caravan and attack the Muslims. Hazrat Abu Sufyan radiyallahu anhu didn't wait for them though. Rather, he continued on with the caravan, but he skirted Badr and headed for the coastline and carried on like that before turning back onto the road leading to Makkah. After he had successfully saved the caravan from the Muslims, he sent a message to the army of the Mushrikeen, informing them that the caravan was safe and that they could now return home. But this army was being led by the Fir'aun of this ummah, the enemy of Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Abu Jahl. So while some Mushrikeen were wanting to return home, Abu Jahl insisted on pressing on and facing the Muslims in battle. So he goaded and guilt-tripped the other seniors of Quraysh and effectively forced them to engage the Muslims at Badr, because he felt certain of their victory, seeing that they outnumbered the Muslims more than 3 to 1. Plus they had the superior fighting force of soldiers, and they had more mounts, more weapons and more armor. So they figured they would walk over the Muslims. So they agreed and headed off to Badr. At the same time, the scouts of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam brought back the news that an army of Mushrikeen were on their way to fight the Muslims and that the caravan had escaped. So the Muslims, small in number, having few weapons and provisions, who had come out intending to raid a caravan, were now suddenly faced with an army of arrogant Mushrikeen intent on wiping out the Muslims. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam consulted with the Sahaba radiyallahu anhum, asking their opinion on what should be done. And the Muhajirin spoke up, telling Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that they would never abandon Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam repeated the question again, and the Ansari Sahaba realized that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was waiting to hear from them as well. So Hazrat Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh radiyallahu anhu, he echoed the words of the Muhajirin and then said that, Ya Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if you were to dive into the sea, then we would follow you and not a single one of us would remain behind. So go ahead, for we are definitely with you. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was pleased with the responses of the Muhajirin and the Ansar radiyallahu anhum, and so the Muslims set out and came face to face with the kuffar on a day that would never be forgotten, a day that would change things forever, a day where haqq would prevail and batil would be vanquished, a day which Allah termed Yawmul Furqan, the day of distinction between truth and falsehood. This was the first major confrontation that the Muslims had with the Mushrikeen. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had divided the army up into different sections and divisions, but before the battle properly began, it was the habit that the champions of both armies would have duels first. So the family of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, Hazrat Hamza radiyallahu anhu, the uncle of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, Hazrat Ali radiyallahu anhu, the cousin of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and Hazrat Ubaidah ibn al-Harith radiyallahu anhu, another cousin of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, they faced off respectively against Utbah ibn Rabi'ah, Walid ibn Utbah, and Shayba ibn Rabi'ah. Hazrat Hamza and Hazrat Ali radiyallahu anhuma killed their opponents with ease, but Hazrat Ubaidah radiyallahu anhu was mortally wounded by Shayba, and Shayba was then finished off by Hazrat Hamza and Hazrat Ali radiyallahu anhuma. After this, the battle began in earnest. And in the thick of the battle, two young boys appeared. They stopped a Sahabi to ask him to point out which one and who exactly is Abu Jahl. When Abu Jahl was pointed out, the two children darted off. These children were Hazrat Mu'adh and Hazrat Mu'awwadh radiyallahu anhuma, the sons of Afra. They caught up to Abu Jahl and charged at him, striking him with their swords. They brought him down to the ground, leaving him bleeding in the dust to die. But stubborn a kafir as he was, he didn't die that easily. And it was only later when Hazrat Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu anhu came across him and found him still alive and talking, that Hazrat Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu anhu chopped his head off and dispatched the kafir to Jahannam. In this battle, the Muslims received reinforcements of a special kind. Allah informed Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam of the 5,000 malaika that Allah had sent to assist the Muslims in Badr. A number of the mushrikeen died at the hands of those malaika that day. The tides turned quickly against the mushrikeen, and they found themselves being overwhelmed by the Muslims, while they thought it would have been the opposite way around. 70 of the Quraysh lie dead on the ground. They're proud and noble ones, those like Abu Jahl, Umayyah ibn Khalaf and others, while another 70 were captured alive, and the balance of the mushrikeen abandoned everything. They turned their backs and fled back to Makkah. The bodies of the dead kuffar were gathered and dumped in a well, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam addressed them in the well and then said, "Now they know that what I told them was the truth," because now they were facing the punishment of the grave before being taken to the eternal punishment of Jahannam. This battle brought practically to life the ayah where Allah says, كَم مِّن فِئَةٍ قَلِيلَةٍ غَلَبَتْ فِئَةً كَثِيرَةً بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ وَاللَّهُ مَعَ الصَّابِرِينَ. That how often has a small army not overcome a large army with the permission of Allah, and Allah is with those who bear patience. The Sahaba radiyallahu anhum returned to Medina victorious. And victorious too were those 14 Sahaba radiyallahu anhum that Allah had specially chosen to be shuhada on that great day of Badr. فَالسَّعِيدُ مَنِ اتَّخَذَهُ اللَّهُ شَهِيدٌ. For the truly fortunate one is he whom Allah has chosen as a shaheed. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam then consulted the Sahaba radiyallahu anhum about what to do with the mushrikeen that were captured. The Sahaba radiyallahu anhum gave their opinions, and Hazrat Umar radiyallahu anhu's opinion was that they should all be killed. Eventually, they were ransomed and not killed. But Allah then on this occasion revealed an ayah which raised the rank of Hazrat Umar radiyallahu anhu for all eternity, because Allah agreed with the opinion of Hazrat Umar radiyallahu anhu. The ayah Allah revealed was, مَا كَانَ لِنَبِيٍّ أَن يَكُونَ لَهُ أَسْرَى حَتَّى يُثْخِنَ فِي الْأَرْضِ. That it is not proper for a Nabi to take prisoners until he has soaked the earth with their blood. But that being that, the Muslims returned with their heads held high to Medina, while the Mushrikeen returned home to Makkah, disgraced, mahzumatan, dhalilatan, hasiratan, haqira. And so the great battle of Badr came to an end. The battle of Badr has so much that can be said about it, that to speak about it for an entire day would still not do justice to it, much less speaking for a few minutes. But inshallah, with this short summary, a person can get some sort of idea of the happenings of that eventful period. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين.